Good Friday afternoon. Thanks for joining us on KARE 11 News Now. I'm Chris Haramsky. Happening right now, Palestinians are moving back into northern Gaza as we speak in droves. A ceasefire between Israel and Hamas is in effect. It's part one of a 20-point plan to bring peace to the Middle East. The deal pauses fighting and begins the process of returning Israelis taken hostage more than 2 years ago in exchange for Palestinian prisoners. Matt Bradley is in Tel Aviv with the latest.
Well, after so much debate, after so much heartache for 2 years now, it looks as though that ceasefire is finally in place in the Gaza Strip. The first time since March that the guns have relatively fallen silent over the Gaza Strip. Palestinians have been seen and photographed by wire agencies moving in droves by the thousands from southern Gaza, where they had been told to seek refuge and shelter by the Israelis, to northern Gaza, which had been the focus of a lot of the fighting over the past couple of months. Now, this deal was approved by Israel's government in the early hours of this morning, and now, or ever since then, that starts a 24-hour period for the Israelis to withdraw to the so-called yellow line on the 20-point plan that President Trump had. After that, that starts a 72-hour countdown during which Hamas and their allied organizations like Palestinian Islamic Jihad are going to have to surrender the 20 living hostages and the thought to be 28 dead hostages still being held in the Gaza Strip. Now, that's a tall order, because according to people that I've been speaking to on the Palestinian side, the fact is that a lot of the people who buried these bodies of these hostages, those 28 who are dead, they're dead now, those people who buried them. So they don't know where the bodies are buried. After this first 96-hour period, the 24 and then the 72 hours, we're in uncharted territory. The terms phase 2, after all of this is over, have not been decided. That is still going to be the subject of very, very difficult negotiations going forward. So again, an enormous amount of optimism, a lot of trust, and a lot of joy around a deal that still could collapse at just about any moment. Matt Bradley, NBC News, Tel Aviv.
That deal is getting mixed reaction around the world. Some saying the first step toward a larger peace deal has been years in the making, but there's still a lot to sort out. Kent Erdahl spoke with Minnesotans with family in Israel and Palestine who are hoping that this marks a turning point.
A long-awaited peace deal between Israel and Hamas has been cause for celebration in Tel Aviv and far beyond.
It's just joy and relief that this 2 years of horror could be coming to an end.
Ari Peretz is in Minneapolis today, but he was in Israel celebrating a wedding when the October 7th terrorist attack took place 2 years ago.
Everything was lovely and normal and full of love and energy. And then we went to sleep that evening and woke up that Saturday morning, just like the rest of Israel, to all the sirens and rockets and explosions and chaos and confusion.
He's grateful his friends have managed to raise a child since the fighting began, but he's even more grateful that many more impacted families will now be reunited.
To have the hostages return home is everything that everyone's hoped for so many days and years in this case.
I'm relieved that my children and my grandchildren who live in Israel aren't running to their safe room to protect themselves from rockets or bombs coming from Hezbollah in the north or Hamas in the south.
Minnesota Senator Sandy Pappas spoke to KARE 11 when the fighting began in 2023, expressing concern for both her family and all families in both Israel and Gaza.
A lot of people are going to be killed, a lot of women and children, a lot of civilians are going to get killed in this conflict.
Never would have imagined that the war would last 2 years.
Today, she says she's simply glad the suffering may be over for all.
I'm so relieved that finally Gazan families will see some relief from the war between Hamas and Israel, because I think the Gazans, the children and the women in particular, have suffered the most.
Jihad Adwan needs no reminder of that. We first met him 2 years ago when his wife lost 5 family members in Gaza.
She's very, very devastated for the children. She attended all their birth. She held them as babies.
Since then, he says they've lost 25 to 30 close family members combined.
There isn't one day that goes by without, reliving the trauma. Some of those relatives are still left under the rubble. We don't know anything about them. So it's a wound that I don't I don't think will ever heal.
It's why he says he's worried about what happens after the hostages are exchanged, and so much of Gaza still needs to be rebuilt.
Waiting for the worst to happen, but maybe hoping for the best. At least our blood is not being spilled in the tens and hundreds of people every day.
Ken Erdahl reporting there. President Trump says that the hostage and prisoner exchange might happen as soon as Monday or Tuesday, and that he and the lead negotiator for Hamas both declared that the war is over. But again, the hostage exchange is just the first part of the president's 20-point peace plan, and key points still need to be figured out, including Hamas agreeing to disarm and allow international forces to help rebuild. Now we turn to Ukraine. People are being forced to run generators to stay warm right now after massive Russian attacks overnight. Video from shortly after those attacks shows extensive damage across Ukraine after what Ukrainian President Zelensky called a targeted attack by Russia. Zelensky saying overnight that Russian strikes are hitting civilian and energy infrastructure as the temperature drops in the region. Turning now to Washington. Here's a look at the nation's capital right now, where the government shutdown is now guaranteed to enter a third week. The Senate leaving town last night after failing to pass a bill and reopen the government, and the impacts are starting to pile up. The White House Budget Office says mass firings of federal workers have started. And today is the first day federal workers will see a hit to their paychecks. Military personnel will miss their first paychecks on Wednesday. There continues to be air travel delays, and some states and organizations have begun pausing benefits and sign-ups for WIC, the nutrition program for women, infants, and children. New today, ICE has been ordered to remove an 8-foot security fence in front of its building in Broadview, Illinois. The site has been at the center of intense protests in the Chicago area for weeks as people push back against ICE in their city. Meantime, a federal judge is now blocking National Guard troops from being deployed in Chicago for 2 weeks. In her ruling, she said she found no evidence of rebellion in the state and said the troops could cause civil unrest. A similar case in Oregon is still under consideration. While that plays out, Governor Tim Walz says he's preparing for the possibility of National Guard troops being deployed to Minnesota.
Local police should know where they're at and those type of things. We're trying to figure out what would that chain of command and communication look like, and how would we talk to the public.
It is very important to note there has been no indication so far the White House is planning on sending troops to Minnesota. But Walz says these preparations are necessary just in case. Developing this afternoon in Tennessee, several people are unaccounted for after a massive blast at an explosives factory. It happened in McEwen, which is about an hour southwest of Nashville. Authorities say there are several people dead and others who are missing. Right now, police are still asking everyone to avoid that area as there's a risk of another explosion happening. Back here at home right now, Minnesota is officially launching a new plan to make sure everyone across our state has clean drinking water. Here's Danny Spiewak.
We're excited to launch this plan for the future of Minnesota's drinking water right here in New Brighton.
Using the northern suburbs as a backdrop, the Minnesota Department of Health unveiled the state's very first drinking water action plan on Thursday.
It's such an important step.
MDH Commissioner Brooke Cunningham says the 10-year plan covers the whole state.
Actions for ensuring everyone, everywhere in Minnesota, has equitable access to safe and sufficient drinking water.
Authorized by the legislature in 2023, the plan builds on existing work done at the local level to guard against threats like lead and PFAS. The plan also identifies some areas of weakness that could threaten the water system, such as a workforce shortage.
The number of water operators, it's a great career. They are declining in the state. The number of folks who can drill a well contractors, that also is going down.
Another problem, Tanny Eschenauer with MDH says, is the risk posed to private well owners because of increased use of pesticides in agricultural lands. More than 1 million Minnesotans get their water from private wells, representing roughly 20% of the population.
So a big challenge for us is how do we reach those private well owners who are responsible for the operation and maintenance of their wells?
Those are questions that the 10-year plan hopes to answer.
A safe, sufficient, and affordable supply of drinking water is essential for healthy Minnesotans, healthy communities, and for a healthy economy.
While this is a 10-year plan, the Minnesota Department of Health plans to update it every 2 years to make sure that they can keep drinking water as safe as possible across Minnesota. State lawmakers in attendance today also said they're going to continue to fight for more funding for clean water in Minnesota in the coming legislative sessions. In New Brighton, I'm Danny Spiewak, KARE 11 News.
Right now, a wildfire inside a state park on the North Shore is growing. The Crosby Fire has burned about 160 acres in a remote area of the George Crosby Manitou State Park. It's about an hour and a half north of Duluth. It caused officials to close part of the Superior hiking trail. And these are the latest pictures that we have from the scene there. You can't see the fire, but there's plenty of smoke. Officials say the fire is being fueled by maple hardwoods and fall leaves that are on the ground up there. And the terrain is making it quite hard to access the area, they say. As of now, the park is still open. But there's now a tool in Minnesota to better detect wildfires before they get out of control. Cameras that can spot smoke before flames go wild. Xcel Energy installed these cameras in other states and is now bringing the idea here. They say that they can scan in every direction and can detect smoke to up to 10 miles away. That information is then sent to local fire departments so that they can get to those fires faster.
We have billions of images, and we're essentially looking at this landscape continuously to see is that smoke or not smoke.
There are rural areas, very hard to access, and if you don't get a jump on it right away, it absolutely can turn into hundreds of acres.
The company behind the cameras is already keeping a watchful eye on 14 states, parts of Canada and Australia. Right now, Xcel Energy has 2 cameras that are installed in Clear Lake and Mankato. The company's goal is to have 38 of them up and running by the end of next year. Stick with us. We got more news, more weather coming up after the break.